Today, I'll share with you where I would choose to go exploring in the world if I were under absolutely no constraints. I immediately thought of a site in what we call the Middle East today. I would choose to visit the site referred to as Gobekli Tepe, a site located at near the northernmost part of the Fertile Crescent in what we would know as present-day Turkey. For as long as I can remember, I've always been interested in ancient megalithic structures like the Great Pyramids of Egypt, the site at Stonehenge, the heads on Easter Island, and the Nazca Lines. I think what fascinated me most was why people so long ago would work so hard to move such large stones, or how on earth they managed to move rocks weighing tons in the first place. In the case of the Nazca lines, my younger self could not even imagine how humans would have made something like that, as they were clearly not naturally occurring shapes. These structures alone helped me understand the unlimited potential of early humans. And not until recently did I discover Gobekli Tepe. And it really caught my attention because it challenged some of the timelines surrounding what hunter gatherers were capable of. Of all the ancient structures I mentioned, none are more than 6,000 years old, that being the one at Stonehenge, and the others are far younger. The fact that this site ranges between 8 and 9,000 years old signifies to me something special may have been happening here. The brains behind the project at Gobekli Tepe is Klaus Schmidt, a German archaeologist. He was interested in an area of the Fertile Crescent he referred to as the Golden Triangle. In his TED Talk, Schmidt brings up an interesting point. Throughout the semester, we learned that early humans were able to rapidly adapt to changing environments, and Schmidt suggests that massive climate change around the time of the Younger Dryas could have been a factor in the evolution of how early humans spent their time. We learned that early hunter-gatherers had ample free time, so why couldn't those early people have spent some of that free time constructing the site? Smith eventually suggests the existence of a pre-pottery Neolithic culture, evidenced by stone tools found at the site, while at the same time the site was absent of any pottery. One of the most interesting finds were the stone sculptures and stone carvings, predating Egyptian hieroglyphics by nearly 3,000 years. The pros and cons to the backfilling that took place at Gobekli Tepe depends on how you look at it. On a positive note, the fact that the site of Gobekli Tepe was purposefully buried may very well be the reason this ancient site survived. Inversely, the dating done at Gobekli Tepe was done mostly on items found at different layers of the fill material, making it difficult to accurately date the remains from the site itself. Stone and flint tools were found in the fill material along with various plant and animal remains. Dating was primarily done on charcoal from plant remains and from material taken from an animal's tooth. And stones found alongside remains indicating cereal suggested food processing happening at or near this site. But again, we have the issue of dating remains found in the material used to cover the site. By drawing date ranges from the fill material, we can estimate when the last human activity occurred. But until an archaeologist can reliably date something from the actual remains, we can only assume the true age of Göbekli Tepe. How is it possible to know if remains used to fill in the site were older or younger than the site itself? What if the remains found in the fill dirt were actually older than the site, and they were just disrupted when the site was ultimately buried? This site goes against the law of superposition, where older dirt is always found at the bottom, where here we may actually have older dirt and remains placed on top of a newer site. While we know potassium argon dating is more relevant to archaeologists with the capability of going back millions of years, In this case, radiocarbon dating can prove itself relevant because the timeline predates 50,000 years ago. With all that being said, it is certainly interesting that plant remains found and dated have come back to between 5,000 and 9,000 years ago. Gobekli Tepe certainly leaves me with some things to think about, like were they farming? Were they feasting? Was this a religious site and what were they worshiping? And ultimately, what were hunter gatherers really capable of? I did not find anything in my research to suggest agriculture at or around this site, but there does seem to be some evidence of feasting coming from the animal remains and various tools found at the site. It's pretty wild to think that humans were processing grains for cereal that long ago. I truly believe this site was some sort of worship or spiritual place. Faith can drive even people today to do some pretty crazy things. This all brings me back to the idea from Unit 5 that hunter gatherers had ample free time, maybe even more than modern humans do. So, could this have been their way of spending their free time by creating these massive spiritual monuments? We may never know, but exploring the possibilities can be just as rewarding. Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. The remainder of the video is dedicated to research and image references. Here in the background, you can even see one of the three-dimensional stone carvings from the site.